Hello, everybody, and welcome to the FilmGamer podcast. This is season 4, episode 7, number 41 overall. Today, as usual, we will be looking at the box office. We'll be looking at my Letterboxd last 4 and more, and picking up some news items last week. So let's get right into it with the number one film at the box office. This is Alien Romulus, which did better than the last movie, Alien Covenant, at the box office, which opened at 35 million. This one, 7 years later, under Disney, opens to 41 and a half, which is pretty good for an R-rated film. And the reviews are pretty good. However, what concerns me is that, similar to a lot of movies this summer, starting with The Fall Guy, Planet of the Apes, and whatnot, they get good reviews, but I don't think they're very good movies. It's part of a trend where I believe that studios have figured out how to trick the system. If they get a likable cast, if they do the right amount of marketing, that's usually not enough. But if something is done well, and I don't just mean structurally, but you have a few viral moments in your movie and it's just comes off incredibly polished. This is something that the video game industry actually figured out uh, almost a decade ago, where if you just kind of don't embarrass yourself, if you play it a bit safe, um, and kind of have it come from a familiar franchise, then you can do very, very well. And that's what Alien Romulus did. It opened to 100 million worldwide. It cost about 80 million, 40 million for shooting, 40 million for post production, which is the biggest I've ever heard. I've never heard of people spending anything specific on post production, but this one is just, and again, it's all rumor and speculation. We generally get a round figure, and thanks to Hollywood accounting, nobody ever really knows or wants to know if someone is making money, because the answer to that usually is either they're making a whole lot of money and they don't want people to know, or they're making a whole lot less money and they don't want people to know. Somebody said, "Oh, it's brilliant stewardship by Disney, taking over the Alien franchise from Fox when Fox sold Disney." And I thought, well, in the documents, it was rumored during the takeover that Disney was most interested in Alien and Planet of the Apes. And now, 5 years after the takeover, they've finally got one entry out on each, and the Apes ends up making less than the last movie. This one will probably end up making more than the last movie, but I would say it's like baseline competence. And people tend to get excited, at least on Twitter, which I know isn't real life, over baseline competence, even if something isn't very special. I mean, Forbes just ran an article, and I follow the guy, Paul Tassi, he seems like a good guy, on how much the main character looks like Ellie from The Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 2, which was one of the best selling video games of the last 4 years and is the subject of an HBO show. Its second season is coming out. In fact, one of the co stars in Alien Romulus this weekend is in The Last of Us season 2 as Dina. That is Isabel Merced, who previously was named Isabel Moner. She played Dora the Explorer. She was in Transformers, the later Michael Bay movies. Early on, I used to confuse her with Jenna Ortega because they're both kind of Latino and dark hair, brown eyes, young. This girl is a bit older, but they've both been sort of in the background, and then for whatever reason, uh, which is kind of creepy to me, people really went off about Jenna Ortega. And I don't know if it's her being in Scream. I doubt it, because that franchise skews older, and then brought in a few younger fans. But I guess it was partially you, which was she was on in the first season, and she went kind of viral after that. That had a lot of, like, a big fan base, starting on Lifetime, being on Netflix. Something goes to Netflix, it's good, people like it, you get a huge fan base. So maybe that's where the fans came from. Sorry about that. My battery just died, but due to the brilliant recovery tactics and how far we've come in technology, it so happens that the project saved without even me having to save it. Doesn't that make us all feel good? I think so. Somebody just tweeted on Twitter. I know it's called X now, but come on. Somebody just tweeted on Twitter. What's the equivalent of that? Like kissed on X? Because they're like kisses and hugs, or etched on X. I don't know. Elon Musk doesn't know what he's doing. Um, you know, maybe he knows about cars though. Anyways, and hey, look at all of my tabs saved too. The funniest thing is that when I started this very episode, Audacity needed to update, and then now when my battery died and saved and recovered, I open up Firefox and it says Firefox has to be updated. Everything needs an update, but you know what? If you kind of go with it, you kind of have to surrender to it, which I don't like doing. I always fight. But if you kind of surrender to it, I talk to my aunt and uncles about technology, and they're the ones to like give up their name and phone number and have it remember everything about them and stuff. And their lives, in terms of navigating technology, tends to go smoothly. It's us who resist the change, who are like, no, I want to keep my independence, that struggle. But, anyways, where was I? Oh, yeah, I was talking about confusing Jenna Ortega and Isabel Merced. Anyways, Paul Tassi on Forbes wrote an entire article that was basically like the main character in Alien Romulus looks like Ellie in The Last of Us, right? Which is true, but it's also a discussion that we had when she was in the movie Civil War, and her name was Ellie, and her character was named Joel. So it's like who do we are we gonna have this conversation every time this actress is on screen? And the annoying thing is just, I don't know, this is me ranting, and I mean it's a podcast, what isn't me ranting? But like somebody's like the range, and it's Kaylee Spenny as Priscilla, and then Kaylee Spenny in Alien Romulus, and it's just like a single image of her, and then a picture of her in Civil War. And it's like, yeah, but that's all costuming. Like you're not even showing us her performance. You're showing a frame from a movie done by professionals, the like makeup and costumers of like the best in the world. Like they can make anybody look good. They can make anybody look amazing. Um, I remember this quote from Princess Leia herself, Carrie Fisher. She talked about coming back to the Star Wars franchise and how basically every actor has to complete a physical, like a health physical, like just come down to LA, do like the light obstacle course or something. Can you get up? Can you climb on here? Because like for insurance purposes, they want to make sure that you're not going to die halfway through. In fact, James Caan was hooked up to an oxygen tank for the movie Fast Charlie, which ended up being his last role. And uh, people were like the suitors were basically like, no, we're not paying for his insurance. If he dies in the middle of the movie, it's going to be a problem. And basically the director and actors vouch for him, and they're like, I'll pay for it if he dies, but like we owe this respect to James Caan. He's a legend and a friend. And there's a lot of tale of that in Hollywood. And the truth is, like, unless there's an accident, and this is just, don't take this as mathematical facts because it's not, but Stanley Kubrick died. Do you know when he died? It wasn't during the making of Eyes Wide Shut. It was already filmed. He had already edited it a bit, and he went home to relax, and he died. And Spielberg said that's what killed him, because he finally let go. He finally relaxed. People don't die on set unless there's a mistake. People die when they finish in Hollywood. That's when they take you. I mean, you could talk about Philip Seymour Hoffman, who died in the middle of the Hunger Games. I wouldn't say that he was, that's not a role that requires the Philip Seymour Hoffman. of, Capote requires the Philip Seymour Hoffman of Twister, which I watched this week, by the way, and he's good in it. Um, but that was at a stage in his career when it meant a lot more to him. This one, he was collecting a check and suffering from some drug problems, similar to Matthew Perry, who recently, four people were charged with the death in relation to Matthew Perry's death this week. Matthew Perry was getting ketamine injections as a point of therapy. Last thing he sent to his assistant was, "Shoot me up with a big one." Those were the last words of Matthew Perry before he died. Now, that might not seem very dignified. However, keep in mind we're dealing with somebody with an addict. Now, people say, okay, of the five people charged, the assistant shouldn't be charged because the assistant's, if he wants to take like a moral stand or something, his option is to take a moral stand and lose his job because he'll be replaced in 5 seconds with somebody who will go get those drugs. That's kind of the one litmus test I've heard about people who are assistants to famous people in Hollywood is basically, will you get these illegal drugs for people? And that's what he's being charged with right now. He's being charged for being complicit in murder, even though he was basically not in a position to say no. Now, for those of you who do not know Matthew Perry, when he died last October, there was an autopsy done, as is usually the case with high profile figures, and somebody with a history of drug problems, as Matthew Perry did. And they found that he had large amounts of ketamine, which can be prescribed and perhaps in fact was to him, but the amount that was in his system at the time was an amount that would be known to cause problems. So that basically the healthcare providers for Matthew Perry around the time were basically supplanting his addiction because they get a kickback when he, purchases the drugs and whatnot, and he pays, and everybody goes merry well round. Now, what authorities have uncovered is that uh, I wouldn't say that it's a ring, but more details are coming out that, like, of the circumstances and systems that were in place to fuel this person's drug habit, and they've charged four or five people, and they found out that Matthew Perry and assistants spent $55,000 on 55 ketamine vials in a 29-day span prior to his death. Basically, his last moments where he went out, he played pickleball, he came home, organized to get the drugs. The assistant got the drugs, came back, gave him the injection. He sat in his hot tub in his Hollywood mansion and either died or passed out, heart attack. I'm not exactly sure. They just mentioned that he dies, but it was like a fatal overdose was the reason. Whether it was like fatal overdose and drown, it was like a fatal overdose. Um, now, the interesting thing about this is just that this has been going on since the death of Michael Jackson and, Prince later on. So I found that interesting, really. Just that this has happened multiple times. It's known that, Grand Theft Auto makes jokes about this, about there are celebrities, they have addictions and pills and medical procedures and stuff is what, like, it's a whole cottage industry. So it's just kind of interesting what will come out about this. And I look forward to it, and I'll update you on that. Now, that's the end of that bummer. So Alien Romulus opens to 100 million profit deal. They spent a lot on post production. The reason I think that they spent quite a bit on this was because the director Fede Alvarez has a solid track record. He did the Evil Dead remake, which I hated, but had its points. And then he did Don't Breathe, which was an original movie, absolutely soared high above expectations. I love that movie. It's a great crackerjack house thriller, home invasion thriller. Tables turn where basically a group of kids break into a house, steal an old man's money, but the old man is like freakishly sensitive, even though he's like blind, so they can't see him, but his senses are incredible. So that's like the gimmick. And it's just a really well done movie. And it went from that, and then he did um the girl in the Spider's Web, which was the sort of sequel slash reboot, mostly a reboot to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It was based on the fourth book in the series. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was the first, and Sony had made a lot of money off the first one. They're like, well, clearly it's the IP, right? It's not David Fincher or Daniel Craig or Rooney Mara. So they hired a director who could do it cheaply but still make a good movie. The problem is that the reason people liked that movie was the combination of Fincher and Rooney Mara. And Rooney Mara was still like into doing the movie. And Fede Alvarez did not hire her again. And the reason he gave made sense. It was that, listen, that was David Fincher's project. He did all of this work. This is the same thing that Peter Jackson said when Guillermo del Toro did the Hobbit movies and then bailed. And he was like, that was someone else's vision. I can't do someone else's vision because I'm going to want to do it my way. So if I do it my way and it's someone else's vision, it's going to screw up. And then you got the Hobbit movies. And then, you got wizards walking around with bird shit on their ears and it being like frankly ridiculous, but it's like, oh, sorry, we have no time to do it. The props have already been made, the angles have been lit, you know, and that's just basically a weird creative mess that you wouldn't think of because you would think, on certain movies like you've heard of point and click adventures or walking simulators where there's no gameplay involved. There are plenty of movies where the director is just the guy who yells cut, not even action. The first assistant director does that. But he just says cut, approves everything, and the guy who makes sure that like nothing's on fire. And then he doesn't put out the fire. That's the producer's job. There's a lot of directors who are like that, but creatively on a lot of projects, directors have a creative vision and they agree to certain things and have different ideas about what's what. And they have all these restrictions worked out with the producer. And a lot of times they just don't line up. So I understand him saying, listen, Rooney Mara is great, but she's not who I envisioned for my version of the movie. If I hired Rooney, that would be me doing David's work, that wouldn't be me doing any of my work. And I get that, and I understand that, and Claire Foy did a fine job, and I thought the movie was okay, but it was like, after that, it's like, come on. What happened to that movie? It bombed at the box office, opened to like $9 million and flopped. Cost 40 million, made 36 domestically. Oh, now I want to look it up as I do. Girl in the Spider's Web. The Girl in the Spider's Web. Sorry, made 35 million worldwide, cost 43. So it flopped. It's probably made his money back now, but this is basically where same actor, like same character, same two characters recast, and it people didn't recognize it as a sequel or anything. It's just like, okay, this is a reboot, and they made it into like a pseudo James Bond ripoff without even hiring James Bond because Daniel Craig asked for a crap load of money. And I hate it when actors do this because it's like they basically tank the movie from happening because it's like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was like kind of a risk. It's a pretty daring movie. It has like a 5 act structure. You can watch one of the screenwriting channels on YouTube break down the structure of that movie as written by Steve Zalian. And it's a pretty good adaptation of the movie where they were like, I can't do this as a traditional 3 act structure, the most common act. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a 5 act structure movie. And that is a long movie and you can tell because it goes on and they defeat the villain. You're kind of like, oh, okay, and then oh, there's something else going on. Okay, and you kind of like it, but it kind of goes on and on. Anyway, it was a hit. Saw it at Christmas, marketed as a feel bad movie of Christmas, despite being like super R rated, not even regarded in as top David Fincher, but I like it. I don't love it, but anyways, it made 232 million worldwide on like a $90 million budget. So like 90 million production plus like a lot in marketing. let's even just say that it was, half that. They kind of broke even, kind of did well, and then you have David Fincher saying, "Well, I don't usually do sequels, but like I do this, it's going to be more expensive." And then Daniel Craig, who's like the second build actor, is like, uh, and I'm going to be asking for a lot more money. Daniel Craig, he loves money. That's why he did the Knives Out sequels, which are like, I mean, I have to look it up, um, because like it's like the amount of money that Daniel Craig has negotiated. He has a hell of an agent, but it was like he was like, "Yeah, I'd rather slit my wrists than do another Bond movie." And then they're like, "Daniel Craig back for more Bond." 150 million pounds or something ridiculous. Why don't I just go to Daniel Craig's IMDb then? Because IMDb, before its user interface was crap, used to include this on their thing, publicity listings of salaries. Okay. No Time to Die, 25 million. He definitely got more than that. Spectre, 25 million plus back end earnings. Okay, yeah. Okay, it doesn't even have the updated of. Oh, he definitely got paid more than 25 million, I can tell you that. It was like 50 million at least. Anyway, Daniel Craig, A-list actor, gets paid a lot of money. That's the takeaway. Anyways, he's like, I want more money. David Fincher's saying it's more expensive. Sony's like, well, we didn't really make a lot of money on that movie. Just going by the grosses and cost, we have to go back to the drawing board. And then they took forever, did that movie, it flopped. Anyways, I still like that movie, The Girl in the Spider's Web. Worth a watch on the afternoon. I even convinced my mom to watch it once, and she was kind of like, yeah, it's not really my thing. But I was happy that I convinced her to watch something that I liked. That was one of the movies, The Girl in the Spider's Web, that I went to on my own, like in the theater, like, which I don't do often anymore, coming out of university. I used to do that a lot and go to the movies by myself because it's like so many movies to see. It's right down the way. I'll go. And then um, I haven't done that much because my dad's here and my dad's usually goes with me. But that was a period where my buddy, who I always went to the movies with, we're no longer like living together and stuff. So he was off doing his own thing, and it was just me. And I'm like, okay, I'll go see this. I'll go see this. I'll go see this. And that's how it worked out. Um, so, anyways, the Girl in the Spider's Web reviewed for on Rotten Tomatoes, just to give you an idea. It was rotten. It was like 38% rotten, and it was like focuses on the action elements of a source material, which was not a part of the first movie. The first movie is just like an adult thriller whodunit. Um, uh, but this one basically turns it into pseudo James Bond, focuses on the action elements for a less complex and only sporadically effective franchise reboot. Um, the one guy saying, Kevin Mayer from Times, it's like, that's it. That's all that changed. Foy in the lead role. Otherwise, everything is the same, only worse. Did we watch the same movie? I don't think so. Anyways, so that doesn't happen. That movie doesn't come out. Nobody goes to the theaters to see it except me, but the director still has his chops, and he ends up, after having a dilly-dallying where they make a Don't Breathe sequel, but he switches places with the co-writer, where he co-wrote and directed the first one, and the second one was the other co-writer directed it, so they switched places. It would be like Barbie, which was co-written and directed by Greta Gerwig, if Noah Baumbach co-wrote and directed the second one, and Greta Gerwig was just one co-writer. Another example of that is Insidious, where James Wan directed the first two, and Leigh Whannell co-wrote it, and then the third one, Leigh Whannell, like directed and wrote the third one on its own, where it's kind of like, yeah, it's the less talented guy doing it, but there's still the vibe. Anyways, he did that, and then while he was doing it, because he was just co-writing and producing, and this was during the pandemic, so like what was able to get made. He also produced the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Netflix. That movie, which was like both a reboot but also terrible. Um, yeah, and it had such a um like yeah, it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's so confusing because there's basically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where chainsaw are like two separate words, and that came out in 1974. Brilliant movie. Watch it. You don't need to watch any of the others. It kind of shouldn't be a franchise. There was a second one that the director also made. That was good. And then they did three and four. Four they ditched, and then it turned out that like the two people who they had cast in this Texas movie were two people from Texas who happened to be Academy Award winner Matthew McConaughey and two-time Academy Award winner Renee Zellweger before they're even famous. So they got really famous, both of them. And then the distributors are like, what the heck? Let's release this dog shit. So they released it and, it made some money, but it's one of those funny, like, can you believe, George Clooney was in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? The man's got to eat type roles. Anyways, so Fede Alvarez did like this movie that he wrote the story for, and like the director did. Apparently, he fought with the director. It's a standalone sequel. So it's a standalone sequel to The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is the um that was the one with Renee and uh them, and it's the fourth one. So this is the fifth one, and instead of calling it five, they just called it the title of the. Anyway, it doesn't matter because this movie sucked. Like it was terrible. There was one good part in it where there was actually a Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a bus where Leatherface shows up with his chainsaw into a school bus full of like annoying kids, and um, he's looking creepy, and this one guy's like prepared to get canceled and takes out his phone, and then the guy just like takes out his chainsaw, revs it, and then like kills them and slaughters them all. But like there's also like an hour and a half of bullshit that like precedes and follows it that like sucks. Um Terrible titling. I don't know what they were thinking. But anyways, this came out, and then in the meantime this guy is like pitching and working on his Alien movie, and it turns out to me to basically be a combination of Don't Breathe in Space with Alien Greatest Hits. And by that is, there's a couple of things. I'll give a bit of a spoiler shield here for Alien Romulus. If you haven't seen the Alien movies, you don't have to seeing this movie. But it's just basically about an alien in space called a xenomorph that is a killing machine. So it's a slasher movie in space. There's an alien that's like, think of it like a giant cockroach or praying mantis or something like that. And it goes and kills people. It has acid blood. It can spit goo and stuff like that. Basically hides in the shadows and runs really fast. That's it. And basically, it evolves in eggs. The eggs launch, and a face hugger, which is kind of like a parasite, can like wrap around your face and implant eggs in your throat and then in your chest, and then a chest burster alien can break out of your chest and then spring another alien and that kind of thing. And it's a good, neat slasher movie. The first Alien is from 1979, and it has the cleanest film stock I have ever seen. If you watch this movie, Alien from 1979, it looks so crisp. You're like, am I watching 4K right now? Like it's the crispest, cleanest looking movie I've ever seen. From 1979. And yeah, most Scott movies look like that, but the film stock of this like just looks. We were watching it on TV a few months ago, and we're like, is this like? Did I switch? Did I upgrade my TV or something? What's going on? But anyways, good movie. Ridley Scott directed it. And then the second one was done by James Cameron. And James Cameron just completely goes in a different direction with the series and basically makes it into an action film with military, space marines, pulse rifles, and adds stuff like the Alien Queen and makes it about motherhood and adds like more themes and stuff like that. And then he does his movie. And then a few years later, um, 20th Century Fox is like, um, we don't have a big movie for this summer. Let's just do another Alien movie. And they want to do it like kind of cheaply. They've stopped and stalled on the story a bunch of times. They're like, well, we'll just hire a music video director to do the movie, and it'll be like his first movie. And that director was David Fincher. And David Fincher is very exacting, and it's his first movie, and he loses a lot of battles and just kind of gives up and kind of cops to some stuff, same way that David Lynch did on Dune and stuff. And like, isn't a fan of the movie. They never got the story elements right. There's some amazing things. The most amazing shot in the series, which of course is copied in this movie, is Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, turning to the right and the alien right next to her face. It's funny. It's generally regarded as the worst film in the series with the most famous shot in it, which just kind of goes to show um, what's interesting about it. And then for the fourth movie, um, they're like, okay, well, let's go in a different direction. How do we do this? All the characters are different. It's like a reboot before reboots. And they're like, well, let's go to this writer who we've worked with in the past, who's like a young gifted writer. And that writer is Joss Whedon, who ended up, creating Firefly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, writing and directing The Avengers. He wrote it, and the director, they get a French director, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, uh, who's kind of a funny guy, and he ends up doing the famous movie Amelie, or Amelie. I never figured out how to pronounce it, with Audrey Tautou right afterwards. But it was shot by a guy, Darius Kanji, who was the cinematographer on Uncut Gems. So you have a lot of talent going into this movie, which stars, Ron Perlman and Winona Ryder in her 90s heyday, and brings back Sigourney Weaver. And it's a beautiful looking movie that's just basically like a glorified B movie, thin characters and archetypes. And then that movie disappoints. People hate it. I saw it as a kid, so I like loved it. Or I saw it as like a tween, I would say. I saw the first Alien as a kid, but it like I was an older kid. I'd say I was like 12 or a tween as well. It's weird to me because like I remember seeing Alien first because my dad had it on DVD. I even as a kid drew the poster. Um, actually, because I knew I couldn't draw, especially as well as my brethren, so I like would draw simplistic movie posters, and one of them was Alien because it's just like an egg with like a green glow to it. And uh, I saw that, and then I was at a sleepover with a friend, and my friend's mom was a big fan of, the Alien and Slasher movies, so um, she had Aliens on VHS, and we watched Aliens then. And then, my dad had Alien Resurrection on a Laserdisc, so I'd watch that. And then my mom's friend took us to see Alien versus Predator um, in the drive-in with iRobot, and that was fun because I remember watching it, and it was the first time I was perceptive of like time passing in a movie. And the funny thing was just that like Alien versus Predator is a 90-minute movie. It's like I love 90-minute movies, and I'm like, wait, you can do that? You can make movies that short, like tell the entire story, and that's allowed? And yeah, that came out, and then I knew of that, and I knew that they were making a sequel, and they had hired for the sequel these two, budget gore guys, the brothers. I always want to say Sprouse Brothers, but that's obviously not it. Um, but Aliens versus Predator Requiem was done by the brothers Strauss. It is the Strauss brothers. Okay. They did the movie Skyline. And the thing about this movie is that they screwed up on the digital intermediate. That is, like, in the post processing, when they do the special effects and make sure the coloring is good, they screwed it up. And basically, as a result, the movie looks super dark. And the reason they did the movie um, was that they went to Fox and they're like, we can do this movie for 40 million, and it ended up making 130 million. Got the worst reviews of the franchise, but it had the cool Pred Alien, where it was the Alien and Predator mixed up, and so that movie came out, and after that, um, some time had passed, and it was just basically like, okay, you're doing the crossover, uh, um, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Like, it's done. You've parodied it. It's dead. So it needed like a reboot. And so because Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan had come out and stuff like that, they're like, okay, well, let's reboot this thing. What if we do a prequel? And they went back to the beginning, hired Ridley Scott to do Prometheus, which takes place, 100 years before. And Prometheus has the sickest trailer of all time. Like, it's just an incredible movie trailer of like, what if this summer, dun dun dun, something just entirely foreboding, awesome action movie. Um, Go ahead and watch it on YouTube. It is up there with Inception as like one of the best movie trailers. I watch it every so often. It like just gets you so incredibly hype because it's like about a team of scientists who, based on really flimsy evidence, go and make a journey across the stars to discover alien life forms. And obviously, when they get there, it's somewhat connected to Alien, but we don't know how it fits in to the Alien verse. And it was from the writer Damon Lindelof of Lost. So he has all these incredible ideas and absolutely no way to solve them. Um, so that movie has a lot of bullshit in it, um, where it's like, hey, why'd this happen? Well, I forget, and it's like that bullshit. And then, Damon Lindelof went to that, and then he kind of screwed up with, Star Trek Into Darkness after that. That movie has some bullshit writing in it. And then he went to finish World War Z, which has like kind of a flat, boring ending to it, but nonetheless saves that movie from being a total disaster because they're like, okay, let's go to a guy who can't write endings, and then they had gone through a lot of terrible riffs on that movie, World War Z, and to the point where Brad Pitt and his director Mark Forster aren't even on speaking terms. And they're like, okay, we need to back up because we're pumping into this. We're losing millions of dollars a day on this. We need to write an entirely new ending. Go to David Lindelof, there he is. And then that movie is okay, but there's nothing to it. And then he writes, after that, he does. I mean, he did Cowboys and Aliens and stuff. And he basically ends up redeeming himself by writing The Leftovers and then Watchmen and stuff. But then he goes right back to Crap Town. And I'm hopping over to Tomorrowland because I had it and forgot it. It's such a forgettable movie. I've never been more disappointed at something that, again, looks so cool. And then you watch it and it's got nothing up its sleeve. That's a Damon Lindelof project. And he redeemed himself again negatively because this past summer he was the very first person who said Joe Biden should step down. And it led to Joe Biden stepping down. And like every week, Joe Biden comes out with some kind of W of like, oh, I, renegotiated for these hostages. I did this. Oh, we're doing this now. Just like constant wins. And it's like, I know Joe Biden was by all accounts um, by non-experts, senile and confused and can barely talk and stuff. But his administration is like the most competent administration, and history will be kind to him. But I'll save that for like in January when people are like, "Oh, Joe Biden, I'll miss you. You're the best." Whatever. It's Damon Lindelof's fault, and it started with Prometheus. By the way, if you watch that honest trailer for Prometheus, it's one of the funniest ones. It's like from the writer of Lost's unsatisfying finale. Um, Anyways, Prometheus happens. People are disappointed, but it looks cool. Made a lot of money. Takes them about 6 years to make a sequel, and they kind of last Jedi it, where they kind of like make some drastic changes that like affect the movie's tonality, and the movie kind of um, it does just okay. But it's kind of like, okay, well, there's not much more to go here. But I want them to finish that prequel trilogy because in all of those movies that Ridley Scott does, he introduces like something that Alien Romulus doesn't have, which are ideas of its own. Um, this movie, Alien Romulus, is well done, but it's a greatest hits package. And there's something to be valued about a movie where you watch and it's like that somebody had that idea and did a thing. In Alien Romulus, I did something that I haven't done for a movie very often at all, and that's I spoiled myself because I was scrolling through, reading all the reactions, and kind of like, I want to see it, I want to see it, maybe I'll wait till Tuesday, maybe this, maybe that. Um, and then I decided, um, as I was scrolling through TikTok, an ad for Alien Romulus came up, and I swiped away from it like immediately because it was like an AI fake of like a character. I'm like, oh no, spoiled first frame. Now I'm even not sure what I saw, but I'm like, okay, well, it's over now. I might as well go to Wikipedia, read the plot description, read the whole thing because it's like I'm basically at this point looking for an excuse not to see the movie. And again, I'm very like protective of like nothing in the last act, nothing this, and with this one, I'm like, okay, well, what if I spoil it for myself? Then what happens? Will I like not want to see it at all because I like know the ending to like Trap because somebody spoiled it for me, but I wasn't really gonna see that movie anyways. So for this, I'm like, oh, well, let me just lift that off my shoulder. And so I read it, I'm like, ah, I can kind of see how it goes, but it didn't really change me one way or the other. I still might see it, but nonetheless, the plot description and what I've seen in the trailers and stuff, it's like, oh, well, this monster is from Alien Resurrection, and they quote this line from Aliens, even though they're characters who aren't related to the characters in Aliens. Um, this happened in Alien Covenant. The exact same scene happens of like, open the door, but like a beat for beat sequence where somebody wants to open the door and somebody doesn't, and there's something going on the inside. They even did that in life. So I'm not saying that that was their idea, but I'm saying like there's a lot of things that happen in this movie that are basically like even the way the main character's hair blows in the wind and stuff. Even though it's like, are they inside? Are they on a spaceship? What's going on? Like, um, they do the same thing uh, in this movie that they did in Aliens, and it's just basically like the Force Awakens, basically, where it's like it takes all the great elements of the series and repackages them in an effective manner, but there's nothing about it that's original. So it's like you'll watch it and like it, but it won't like linger or have value. Like nobody's gonna watch Alien Romulus and think like, oh, can you believe that bullshit? I can't believe they came up with that, and it's actually something original. It'll be like, oh, it's weird that this character did this thing. And then some BSer online will be like, well, actually, this and this and this and that. And I learned that that was me today because I saw somebody on Twitter post, like, what's a movie that's unlike any other? And I kind of took that as a challenge because people were posting, like, well, I think, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is unlike any other. I'm like, but isn't you know, because the idea is what's a movie that doesn't have an equal, that nobody's tried to make, that's like so original, but nobody's ever done anything like it before or since. So I started like adding to the comment thread of like, well, not Roger Rabbit because of this, and kind of like inviting for a debate. And the guy who started the thread was like, "Are you content to like just ruin my thread with like everybody's response?" And well, actually, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I thought you would appreciate the extra comments." And he's like, "Well, not when you're being so negative." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it." You know, I didn't realize it, but it's annoying. Like on Twitter, it's like it's formulated that way, but everybody's like meant to be annoying. So it's like the people that complain that of like everybody's been adding me and responding to the thing that I posted. And it's like, well, what a good problem to have that you say something so popular that people want to engage with it, and people like turn off responses. It's just the height of like woe is me. And it's like, get off Twitter then, or X, or whatever you want to call it. Anyways, the number two film at the box office was Deadpool and Wolverine again. I will say though that Deadpool did pass Joker to be the highest grossing R-rated film of all time worldwide. And as like a tip of the hat, Todd Phillips, who directed Joker, the previous number one movie, had a picture on Instagram of uh, Deadpool at the top of the Joker steps saying, "Hey, I have to tip my hat to you." And then it's, part of this thing that, studios and filmmakers will sometimes, when people break an opening weekend record, um, or a total gross record, mostly for like opening weekend and worldwide movies. So like Avengers, Spielberg films, Star Wars films, Disney films, that kind of thing. Um, Somebody will tip the hat to them and do like a graphic or something like that. The funny thing is, like, it started off like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and then it was like James Cameron and himself, and then like the Avengers and James Cameron, and then James Cameron again, and then people just stopped writing, and then we just got this last one. Uh, Universal did one for when Jurassic World beat the opening weekend record, but we just got this one of Todd Phillips to Ryan Reynolds saying, hats off. And it's like people are wondering, is Joker Folia Duh, which is coming out this October, is that going to be the Deadpool record? Because people still talk about Joker. Although the first movie, man, I thought it was boring. And that was another one that was influential, kind of doubling down on like movies that are just other movies. And Quentin Tarantino talked about this with like Ad Astra, of like, okay, is this again in 2019? Is this what we're to expect now of just like Ad Astra is just basically Apocalypse Now in space? Is this just what we're doing? And somebody's like, Quentin Tarantino, of all people, should have some nerve to talk about ripping other people off because he is the king of that. But, anyways, they Deadpool and Wolverine is the highest grossing R-rated movie ever made in terms of dollar gross. Like if you were just for inflation, Joker has made more. Maybe Passion of the Christ even has made more because that came out like 15 years before Joker. Um, but the number three film at the box office is Ryan Reynolds' Wife. It Ends With Us, which has made 180 million worldwide on a $25 million budget, profit deal. But interestingly, the background behind the scenes stuff that we're into has evolved in the way that the director and star Justin Baldoni hired a PR crisis negotiator. And the thing is that the PR crisis negotiator isn't just anybody. Um, but he hired Melissa Nathan, who is Johnny Depp's PR person, who helped him through the Johnny Depp trial. So people are like, "Oh, he must have done something bad if he needs her." Um, uh, because there were rumors, the latest rumors are like that maybe a few kisses lingered on too long or something like that, which that's not the main thing. The main thing is that he was saying to, like, I don't know if it was her personal trainer, it's not super clear, but he was saying to, and this is all alleged, again, I wasn't there, I have no idea, but he was like, saying to her personal trainer or the trainer on the film, the health coach, whoever, and he was like, "Oh, I'm nervous about this." Is a guy who like works out and stays in shape. I don't know if he's hot girl fit, but he was like saying to some trainer like, "Oh, I'm nervous about picking up Blake Lively," like implying that she was fat because he knew that she felt bad about her postpartum body, and that was maybe her nagging or something, asking other people. And it's just petty bullshit like that. Like, you know, I still maintain at the end of the day, like everybody's gonna get paid. This movie's a big hit, so in a way, the suffering was worth it. I'm sure in 20 years, either him or her are gonna write a book of like, I actually felt really sad during this movie, and you have no idea. And I'm sure like the stresses of doing a movie this big when you're on the public stage, like that's this big of a hit, that like gets to you mentally. Of like essentially everybody seeing you, all eyes on you, including if you make a mistake or if your movie is shit. So, this movie has started a warring faction of like a lot of people take the director's side, some people take her side. Um, I've never seen, like, granted, after this, you'll be hard pressed to find, and it was rare before, of like a director who is also the star, and then the co star is also the producer, but then the director has the rights. So to deal with the sequel, which he has said, yeah, I'm not gonna be around for the sequel. Like he's basically saying this is the biggest hit of his career. There's a sequel waiting in the wings, and he's saying even though he owns the rights to the sequel, he's like, yeah, they're gonna get someone else. You kind of got to know that things went bad along the way. So, my guess would be, assuming he did something bad, is that he's going to be forced to sell the rights. And if they want to make some money, they'll basically have to pay him to give up the rights, or they can retain him in name only as a producer, pay him the money, hire who they want, make the sequel. That's the way to do it. And then, make the sequel within 3 to 4 years. That's just the way to do it. It hasn't been announced yet, which is kind of crazy because it's a foregone conclusion. I would imagine that, as Sony has done in the past, because they haven't announced Uncharted 2, they're like, yeah, it's in development. But you know that they're working on it. Whereas, like, Bad Boys, um, which, the fourth one was announced the weekend the third one came out, of like, oh, this is making real money. Okay. Like, next one coming 2 years from now. Like, really big hits, they do that. Sometimes Lionsgate would even do this with Saw, where they're like, next year, like the next Saw is coming, and that was the case with the last Saw, Saw 10. They're like Saw 11 next year, and then thankfully, because Saw 10, in my opinion, wasn't very good, and the weakest part of that was the writing. They're like, yeah, it's coming. We're actually going to take more time on it, on a Saw movie. Like they used to come out every year like clockwork. They're like, yeah, we're taking some more time on it. We're getting new writers. I was like, oh, thank God. Um, so yeah, number three. Number four is Twisters, which has a fascinating trajectory where it's pretty close to beating the initial gross of the first Twister, which grossed 241 million, and this one is coming close to beating it. But usually, movies match their international market and domestic market with like a 50-50 split. And sometimes based on subject matter, like if a movie takes place in Europe or is historical, it'll make like a third domestically and then two-thirds internationally. Or if it has a lot of international stars, sometimes it'll overperform. If it's a CGI extravaganza, Asian countries like eat that stuff up. There's a lot of different things, but usually it's like a 50-50 because it's like America versus the rest of the world in terms of like going to the movies. So, like in terms of dollars made, you would think like that, it wouldn't be so even. And, Canada produces like adds five to like 5% of that. gross like, a few million, maybe 50 million and stuff. But like all in all, it's like basically like 80% America, maybe 20% Canada or something. Still, like if you ask movie studios to give that up, no, they're not. They're not giving up that money. Although there's plenty of Canadian distributors. I believe it's VVS Films who does a lot of the Netflix stuff. If a movie's coming to Netflix, it's probably um, coming to theaters in Canada, at least in the independent theaters by VVS Films or somebody. But interestingly, with Twisters, it's made like 200 and nearly 50 million. At least that's where it will end up. Um, and it's made 95 million um, internationally. So it's made like three times less or two and a half times less um, internationally than it has in America. Now, the interesting thing is that the first movie was a hit overseas. So, and it had Warner Brothers distributing it. The first movie, Warner Brothers had the reins in North America, and for this one, Universal did it. They swapped places, as I've mentioned before. And I watched Twister for the first time this week on 4K, and it held up pretty well. There's not a lot going on there, but the love story, the central love story that's missing in the sequel is like vital to this movie and makes it feel like not a waste of time. It's not the best plotted movie. It's kind of ridiculous, but the having Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton there makes it, worth your time, like worth a watch. So I enjoyed watching it. And like that movie did 241 domestic, 252 international, 494 worldwide. And this movie, the sequel, which doesn't really have anything aside from Dorothy, which is like the tornado testing device. That's the only thing that carries over. Um, that opened equivalent to what the first Twister did, but like worldwide, it's capsized, and it costs like 155 million. They say initially like 200 million, and then they revised it down. I don't know if that's because of the Oklahoma tax credit situation, but it's a question of okay, if this movie cost 155 million, and on average, studios get back 50% of grosses, and they added like $100 million marketing campaign, which these movies usually have. Sometimes they have a matching marketing campaign, but like let's say 100 million. Then this movie basically spent 255 million. And if it's made 238 million domestic, 95 million worldwide, 333. So it's like it spent 255 and it's made like essentially only 80 million in profit. It's kind of it's Hollywood accounting. It's like dicey. It's like who's really making money here? The local territories, I guess. It's all about what you pay and spend. But, the rule in the book I'm reading now is nobody knows anything. You think something will work, you have no idea. You think something won't be a good idea. Like I thought the Meg wasn't going to be a good idea. I thought it was going to be a big flop. Huge hit. Who knew? You know, um, they spent 140 million on it. Bad idea. Huge hit. Who knew? Um, that movie, 2018, made 145 million. Cost 130. Was huge internationally. Made over like 500, half a billion worldwide. That's crazy to me. And then you look back and you say, well, there hasn't really been a huge hit movie. Sorry, that was my phone going off. Stupid notifications. That I can see why I turned it off earlier. Anyway, made a lot of money. So nobody knows anything. You never know what's going to be a hit. Is Twisters a hit? I don't know. We'll find out maybe at the end of the year because, a lot of times in quarterly reports, these big companies, they're accountable to shareholders. And so they'll say, Universal will say, and we had a big hit with Twisters. And then, the investors can breathe a sigh of relief. Coraline, which has been, you know, that movie did like so well in theaters when it was originally released in 2009. That was the year that Avatar came out. But it was before Avatar came out. It was just as 3D was like really taking off because there was Christmas Carol 3D and like a lot of animated movies, Disney movies doing well in 3D, Nightmare Before Christmas, and then this was the director of the Nightmare Before Christmas, and he did Coraline. And people really liked that movie. When I finally watched it, I was disappointed because the reputation preceded it and it just didn't hold up for me. But it did like $75 million and over 100 million worldwide. So it was like a pretty big hit. Um, so if I do all releases like after 75 million, it's now made like 93 domestic. It's one of the few movies that gets like re-released and continues to do well. So it coming out, for its 15th anniversary, which is by the way, its 15th anniversary year, like it came out in February and they're releasing it now in, you know, uh, August. That's like I don't know, that's always been weird to me. Like, Interstellar was gonna have, like, an anniversary screening, like a 10-year anniversary screening in September. It's like, but it came out in November, and now it's getting delayed to December. Like, I don't know. Make it make sense. I don't know. I think going to see movies when they're already out, like, it's weird to me. I turned down this week, um, I they were never really offered to me, but Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban tickets. I kind of think I should have s- gone because my cousin was like, I have, you know, tickets to movies in the penitentiary, Kingston Pen showing Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, the only time I watched Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was in theaters. I think I watched it on video too, but I never liked it as much as everyone else did. And Alfonso Cuarón, who's won two Best Director Oscars since then, I was gonna be going by myself to see a movie I'd already seen twice that I didn't like that much, but it was in a really cool setting. I saw "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" with one of the viewers here, and I like that. Um, I like the viewing. I didn't like the movie so much, but the way that I organize those things is I usually like to go see something where it's a new experience. Like, uh, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? My parents rented it. I never got around to seeing it, but it's like I got to see something new plus the new vibes. So going to see movies in the pen again, even though the weather was warmer, by myself to see a movie that I didn't wasn't crazy about, even though there was maybe more I'd pick up on this time. Just go by myself on a Friday night. I was kind of iffy about it. Although I kind of, you know, what did I end up doing that Friday night? I watched the Union, which was the latest Mark Wahlberg movie, which is made so it's the definition of competent but forgettable. It like the story is bare bones. It's full of like double crosses. Somebody falls into a river, but they don't die, and then they show up, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy. You know, um, no surprises. Again, deliberately gets rid of the main romance in the movie. And it's funny because it's like it's not like young people or Gen Z. It's Mark Wahlberg and Halle Berry. And it's like, okay, two people in their 50s. Are we supposed to believe that they're not like they're like consenting adults who have like lived a long life? Are we gonna pretend that they're like not getting it on immediately if they're like again, they're old flames. So, like, if they already have like a romantic history, then why are they playing coy? It just like makes no sense. And the director said in an interview of like, oh yeah, we want the audience to want them to get together in the sequel. And so, like, root for the sequel and then maybe want to see the sequel and then we'll explore the romance. I'm like, what? Like, every single time people hold stuff off for like the next movie doesn't happen and it ends up sucking. So, yeah. Um, The Union, watchable background second screen movie, I'd call it, where it's just kind of like, yeah, be on your phone in the room and stuff. It is not a movie that deserves your full attention. But if you're like want something on, I guess that it not made for theaters at all, not even made to be a real movie, not even made for people who like might be watching something for like the first time. It's like made for sickos like me who are like, yeah, I could watch 1,000 of those action movies. You know, I love them. Um, and it's like we know you're gonna see 100 more. We know you've seen 100 less. Like I'm not gonna watch the sequel, um, because usually for movies like this, it starts where it starts and it just gets worse. They'd have to basically like hire um like a big gun director and then also have them care. Because that's a big thing that I've noticed. Like you can have like a great director, but if they're half-assing it, it's better if to get like an amateur guy who doesn't know what he's doing but really cares to do a movie than it is to get like Steven Spielberg half-ass it and do like the BFG. Not that he half-assed the BFG, but I just mean like that's an example of a movie where it's like, why is Spielberg doing this? And then you watch a Monster Calls, which is like more interesting, similar storybook thing. Um, and it's like, yeah, that's maybe more interesting. I guess that's a bad example because like a Monster Calls has all the elements of like a Spielberg movie, but isn't Spielberg enough, and Spielberg should have taken it. And then the BFG has all this like weird stuff in it that makes it interesting. That's sort of well done. The whole story is just like too nonsensical that I can't get invested. I don't know. I have movie feelings. I have never met a real person even discuss the BFG or a Monster Calls, and I realize that with I mean, I'm running a movie blog, but the people that I discuss movies with now, it's like they're people that I've never met. I mean, I discuss stuff of movies that I watch with my mom and my pa and my brothers and my sister and, their in-laws and stuff. But like, other than that, and maybe a few words to my friends, like, I don't like talk. I mean, I talk about movies with everyone, but there's so many movies that I just like, you know, um, like I don't engage with these people. I engage a bit with my brother when we're talking about stuff, but like the my most of my engagement is online. So I don't know. That's an interesting thing. Number six, Despicable Me 4. Yeah, it made a lot of money. Newsflash, who cares? Number seven, Trap. Interestingly, this movie cost 35 million. It's made 63, and Shyamalan is already pleased with how it's done. Now that could be just like PR and stuff like that. So holding okay. It covered its budget domestically, so Shyamalan is like, great, I can make a new one. He's already in the writing at another one, so I I wonder with Shyamalan, will he continue his work at Warner Brothers? Will they be like receptive to him doing another? Is he a free agent? What's he gonna do now? Um, I'll be interested. Um, because it says yeah, distributed by Warner Brothers and then doesn't have anything, you know. It's signed a multi-year first look deal with Warner Brothers. So, his daughter's movie, The Watchers, which came out, wasn't well reviewed. And then that. So it's like he'll write a screenplay and then he'll send it to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers will be like, okay, I'm interested in this. But keep in mind, Shyamalan funds his own movies. So he's like, I have this. It's gonna cost less than 60 million. Um, do you want in? Is basically it. And they just basically like distribute it, or they can decide how much money they put into it. Like with Furiosa, which I watched for the first time again since theaters last night and enjoyed it. I I was pretty right on with Furiosa when it comes to like my original assessment, despite my misgivings about the presentation of like being late, and I only missed like barely the first 5 minutes. My friend was like, right, I barely missed anything. And I'm just kind of like, oh, he's just saying that to make me feel better. I'm so self centered, aren't I? When it comes to thoughts on movies, of like, there's a quote online. Somebody said, people's attitudes would change once they figured out how little people think about them. And I try and think about that all the time, but I just can't. I remember one time I was out with just like a buddy who I'd met, and like he's like, "Oh, let's go talk to these girls," and I'm like, "Oh, they don't want to talk to us, you know." And stuff, and he's like, "What are you talking about? Like they're not even thinking of you, you know." And I'm just kind of like, "Oh, you know, what is it? Like your perception is your reflection or something like that. You are how you feel, something like that." So it was just like he was like deliriously positive, as many of my friends are. And I wasn't that interested, but I'm like, yeah, okay. And it worked out, you know. Ended up having a nice conversation and all the things. So I could stand to be a bit more positive and listen a bit more, I guess. Um, Anyways, number 8, Inside Out 2. It has made also a significant amount of money and, 1.6 billion, and these numbers, when let me tell you, when it gets up to these levels of like this amount of money, who cares? Like, it's past a billion and a half. Um, it's over a bill. Like, once a movie hits over a billion, and people count worldwide. I like to stick to domestic because I find that it means something. It's like being collected in a single territory of these United States, so it reflects the nation in a way. But when you get to worldwide, it's like, yeah, was it a good enough movie and was it marketed well enough? That's basically it. So I mean, Inside Out 2 making 1.6 billion changes nothing. Deadpool 3 making over a billion changes nothing. We're gonna get more of the same. But if I go yearly, 2024 in year releases, 1.625 billion for Inside Out 2. Um, yeah, they don't update this very much. Because Despicable Me is number 2, and then like I get that they're doing it domestically first, but like yeah, this doesn't matter. Is this gonna let me do worldwide? Yes, it is. And if I do top lifetime gross, so I mean, just for a reference, Inside Out 2 is now like the um number 10 highest grossing movie of all time. And but it's on its way to beating The Lion King. It's about let me see, 30, let's see, 25, 35, 38 million away. Can it make it? Who cares? Well, I care. I mean, I'm doing this thing, so if we go back to the weekend box office, da, 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 3 million. I mean, it might be running out of room, guys. I don't know. But, like, again, who cares? Um, and then, Mufasa to The Lion King 2 prequel, which is like The Godfather's coming out. They rearranged the canon where Mufasa is not really Scar's real brother. He was adopted, which makes you go, oh, well, if he's not really part of the pride, then he's a usurper to the throne and blah, blah, blah. Like, same thing they did with Black Panther 2, same thing they did with, uh, man, why am I blanking on this? I just had it a second ago. Um, Man, okay, now it's gonna bother me because it was like another Disney. Oh, Thor Ragnarok, you know. Um, it's like who cares who? And then somebody's like, I'm pretty sure like King of the Jungle and Pride and all. It's like they're not all related. It's just whichever line was the toughest. So it's like, why do we care about this? And I didn't even watch the first Lion King, the remake, the live action remake, which isn't actually live action. It's animated. There's like maybe 5% of it that was like maybe they did a close up of some real grass or something, but that movie is entirely CGI. And nonetheless, it's going to make a lot of money. Ugh. To whose benefit? I say. The billionaires, as Bernie Sanders would say. And then, number 9 is Street 2, which I'm guessing is an Indian film. Um, I honestly do not know. I assume Indian. I always assume Indian because it's the second highest population. And if it was Chinese, then we would know. Um, is a Hindi lang? Yeah, nailed it. Second biggest population in the world. So, you go by first biggest. Obviously, it's not Asian, um, Chinese because they don't allow their movies to come here, and we don't allow too many of their movies here. So it's probably Indian. And then the third thing is that if it's anime, in which case it might be Japanese, but there aren't too many of those, or it would be Korean, in which case, the people who are film adjacent tend to talk more about Korean films than that because they have the most interesting culture, I guess. And they also translate the best, Squid Game and Parasite are both Korean, and there's only like 19 letters in the Korean alphabet. And if you watch a Korean movie that's subtitled, the languages are so in like very short sentences, so they translate very well. And that's why Korean cinema is like the most popular and stuff with the aforementioned Squid Game and Parasite because like everything is short and sweet with the translations. And so, that works out. And at number 10, the movie that didn't work out is Borderlands, where they chose a very expensive cast, didn't have the proper script. It got rewritten a bunch of times. They filmed it with Eli Roth. They found out it didn't work. To get that cast together again is very expensive. So they did expensive reshoots, and it still kind of didn't work. They tried getting it to work, and people just weren't buying it because they didn't get the fans on board, and the fans are your core base. You got to get them electric so they can nudge all their friends to go. And Borderlands last game was in 2019, and they basically it was interesting of them to cast Kate Blanchett and Jamie Lee Curtis because they're both like nearing 50 and then one's in her 60s and stuff like that, and then split the difference and cast like Kevin Hart, and then cast Ariana Greenblatt, who was in Barbie and stuff like that, and hope that it works together because they're all kind of different. It's like, hey, maybe we can get women in there. But it's like my mom would never go see Borderlands. I'll go see it. I want to see it. There are people who show up to every movie, but like, who is this for? Because the fans didn't like it. You know, Uncharted, it's obvious. It's like Indiana Jones. You just play to those people and you have young stars in it. There you go. Works every time, even if the reviews are bad, which they were. um but yeah, and then other stuff. um Harold and the Purple Crayon at 11, I just want to say Zachary Levi did a very funny um interview where he was like interviewed by kids. It's called Kids Gloves, and they were like, what's it like being in the Marvel universe, like joking because he plays Shazam in the DC universe, and he was like, actually, I was in the Marvel universe. I played Fandral in Thor 2. Bet you didn't know that, and then he got killed. But he's like, it was fun to be in it for like a second for those two movies. um and then he's like, well, there'll be a Shazam 3. Will I have to watch it? And just like funny stuff like that. But stuff like that, when you show you can be made fun of, it shows you have like a sense of humor about yourself, makes people like you better. Um, People kind of don't like him because he's a bit of a tryhard and his movies aren't great. And he was seen as being like kind of anti-vaccine for a bit, or like adjacent to that, and that's always a bad look because the moment you kind of show that you're a bit of a wild card with like some of your beliefs, just strictly as an actor, it's like, oh, like that polarizes people, especially in today's, social media world. So, like, John Voight was like, I would never bring up politics on set ever. Like, on Ray Donovan, somebody took a picture of him and posted it online, made some political statement. Uh, and Francis Ford Coppola with the Megalopolis coming out, and there's a development on that. But Francis Ford Coppola um, showed um, the movie Megalopolis at Cannes, and then during the press conference was like, John Voight, you have different politics than me. What do you think? And John Voight has crazy politics because he's like, Trump is going to save America. He's the only one. Trump is the only one who can save America from ruin. We need to vote for him or the world is going to end, blah, 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 blah. And like some of the stuff he says just sounds insane, but fascinating because he's an engaging actor. Um, but anyways, he was like, I didn't like that. I don't know why he asked me that at a press conference. I would never bring my politics to work, is what he said. And I'm like, oh, that sounds responsible. No wonder he keeps getting work. You know, he's a professional. But yeah, that's the top 10 movies. As for the update on Megalopolis, there was kind of like a movement to, as there always has been, get Francis Ford Coppola canceled by Variety. The trades and magazines have never liked him because he's like completely doing his own thing. And then people were like gross because apparently he was going around kissing people on the lips, trying to get them, uh, in the mood or whatever for a scene. And he's like a 78-year-old man. He's like older than a baby boomer. He's from the silent generation. And people are like, oh, disgusting, blah, blah, blah. And like, what's funny is Deadline, who's owned by the same magazine people, Condé Nast, as Variety. Is it Condé Nast or is it different? Now I gotta look it up. Oh, I'm annoying myself. Variety magazine. Okay, but take me to Wikipedia. I know they're a trade magazine. They're called the trade magazine because they trade publications. They're owned by publicly traded companies. They're big deals. Penske Media Corporation. Sorry, Penske Media Corporation. They own both Variety, official glossy magazine, and Deadline, which is like, just a blog basically. And Deadline like took Variety to task of like they got it wrong because Francis Ford Coppola, the lady who he kissed in the video, said, this was taken out of context and it was totally fine. And I never want anybody to feel like I was unsafe. This is BS media stuff. You didn't have my permission to record on set, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, so he's like reverse Uno'd or something now. So, anyways, the reviews of his latest movie, which he spent 120 million on, are mixed. Um, it's kind of wacky, a bit of a mess. Um, the trailer for Megalopolis, it looks like something eh, from like the 80s and seems like something that like nobody would ever make. Um, it's weird, it's stilted, but like I'm interested to see it. Um, it's rated 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. Um, the film, according to the Wrap, expertly assembled, sleepily directed all at once. It wows with its imagination and erudition, all the while leaving you a little more than bemused. It's just basically about like an architect who falls in love with like the mayor, um, and it's basically like a Greek tragedy metaphorically on top of that. And it's just basically like the face of America or something like really big, 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 big themes. So yeah, that's fascinating. So moving on. Um, the one movie that I didn't mention that I saw, because I mentioned Twister. I think last week I mentioned Sniper Ultimate Kill, which I gave 3 stars to. It's just simple, well done stuff. Oh, I didn't end up rating The Union. I thought I gave it 2.5 stars. Okay, there I fix that. I also gave Jackpot 2.5 stars because it had a high concept. Jackpot is an Amazon Prime movie starring Aquafina and John Cena, two people who are not really actors. It has a cool concept. It's basically takes place where there's a lottery in California where if you win it, you win, millions and billions of dollars. But the catch is that you have to survive until sundown and anybody can legally kill you. Of course, Aquafina like accidentally ends up winning the lottery and she hires John Cena to protect her. So it's just basically like them running from people who are trying to kill them. The only catch is they can't shoot you, um, and you can't kill them. So you just basically have to run. And it's okay. It's from the director of Bridesmaids, but also that director did Ghostbusters, the female one. So, yeesh, you know, another polarizing film he did was A Simple Favor, where it's kind of like, okay, there are parts of this that are well done, and then other parts that are totally phoned in. Uh, he's a hit and miss director. He's like the comedy Ridley Scott, who actually has a lot of comedy in his movies. But, anyways, I gave it 2.5 stars because high concept is hard to do. The movie basically had to be more self aware. Like, because there's a funny joke at the end where Aquafina plays an actress and she survives because she knows stage combat and stuff like that. And she's like, I don't want to be an actor anymore. All the actors are just, YouTube stars or wrestlers. They're no real actors anymore. And, I thought that bit worked because Aquafina is like a former YouTube star and John Cena is like a wrestler turned actor. So it's like the movie either needed a tad more completely self aware, which is lazy but easy to do, or it needed to completely build up this world of like, the comedic version of The Purge, basically, where it's like, what does America look like and stuff? And had they kind of doubled down on that worldview, it would have worked better. Um, the one thing that bothered me is that in the movie, um, Aquafina says on accident, which drives me nuts because it's improper language. And I tweeted at the screenwriter and said, hey, don't know if this is you. I know you're British, um, but like, we don't say on accident. It's by accident, as in by way of. It doesn't happen on top of something else, an accident. It, like, happens as an act of its own, so something doesn't happen on accident. It happens by way of accident. So by accident. And he's like, yes, I understand. But if you look up American vernacular, standard American vernacular, it's quite common. I'm like, okay, but it's wrong. So it's like just annoying that like a smart character says it. But I'm like counting my stars, trying to be less of an a-hole. So I'm like, okay, yes, thank you, you know, uh, and then silently fuming, as I should, because what's happened, and I believe this is what's because I've written tweets, and when I write my tweets, I use the swipe keyboard, and the swipe keyboard is easy because you just basically use your thumb, drag it across the keyboard, and spell it out on the keyboard, and the keyboard guesses with about 80% accuracy, or let's say 75% accuracy, what word you're spelling. So you'll see a lot of people spell stuff and just use the wrong word completely. And it's a fast moving world. So that's basically what we're dealing with here. Of like, if you're looking on Twitter or something and somebody uses an obvious word, you skip over it because your mind is already calculated past it. But that's like the reason is just that you typed with their hands and didn't like double check before they and sent it. And I do that. I'm like, crap. But I already spent the work. Do I have to delete the whole thing and do it again? I don't care, you know? And that's just the fast moving world we live in. So, yeah. One last film that I saw, uh, or I have two more, is M, which is a remake. There is a 1931 movie by Fritz Lang. It takes place in German, subtitled. I'm like, I ain't watching that. I'm watching the 1951 version that's American, non subtitles. And it's about a man who is a child murderer and on the run from both the police and the mob, whose operation has been destabilized by this hunt for this child killer. They realize it's a priority for the authority. They will not stop, which means that the mob cannot conduct their business. So it's in their best interest to find this man and, get rid of him. And it basically, interestingly, follows both the man and the mob and the police on him. The problem is that the way that old movies go is that all of the men, A, it's in black and white, B, everybody wore suits back then, and C, they also wore hats. So you have a lack of diversity combined with that, and you basically have a bunch of white men in hats and suits. One's a mobster, one is a police captain, and then one of them is the killer, and they all look the damn same. And so there were a couple of times I'm like, wait, is this the mob? Is this the guy? Is this the, not a lot of diversity in camera angles or costumes or close-ups. So that was a bit hard, but it's like straightforward done, and I enjoyed that. My mom even could tell that I was watching like an old movie. But yeah, people are gonna be like, oh, you should have watched the original, it's classic and stuff. And I'm like, I saw the reviews on the remake. Variety said it was fine. Um, I don't want to watch a subtitled movie. Call me what you will. Um, I'll watch the American remake from 1951. And it oddly hasn't been remade since, even though it's like regarded as like a classic. Um, but they go inside the Bradbury building in it, which is a landmark in Los Angeles. And the funniest thing about that is that I saw it, I'm like, oh, they went into the Blade Runner 500 Days of Summer building. Like in Blade Runner at the beginning, and they go into um, an abandoned apartment. I'm not sure if it's Rick Deckard's apartment or where the replicants are living. Um, but it's an abandoned elevator, and I really remember the production design of that because it's like very dark and moody and atmospheric. And then at the end of 500 Days of Summer, when Joseph Gordon-Levitt goes for his job interview, he goes into that same building, but it's all like bright and sunny, and that's where he meets Autumn in the movie ends, and it was like the IMDb trivia facts of, well, actually, this is where the Blade Runner movie was filmed. But this movie, M, was made before all of that. So it wasn't like a big deal to get like the rights to film there and stuff like that. So it's just kind of funny to see a major set piece of it take place where the guy, kidnaps the kid. The way he does it is just like he gives her a balloon and he walks with her and she kind of doesn't know what's going on, and is just kind of like with him. She doesn't even know that she's captured. And I thought that was fascinating. And then I also thought like it a set piece taking there, knowing the history of like the movies that happened after, and it was kind of interesting to me. And the dialogue being a lot simpler in the way that people talk. And they also, in those old movies, like they brush over plot points a lot. Like there's much less exposition in these. Like there's a requisite exposition. Like there's a whole monologue about like who this guy is, what his MO is, this, that, and the other thing. But in terms of like transitionary plot places, there's just like, and now we're here, and now this is going on. Or there's like a scene in the original Dial M for Murder, the Hitchcock movie, where they find out the guy who's like the murderer, and he doesn't have his like villainous freak out, I'm gonna kill you, or like clever one liner even. He's just like, hey, you got me, let's have a drink. And then happy music plays. And it's like this guy tried to murder his wife. Why are we so like and that's the end of the movie. And it's like just kind of this fascinating uh simpler time of movies where like today everything needs a backstory and needs to be explained, and there's like lore. And in old movies there's like none of that. It's just like, yeah, this guy was a killer. That's the end of that, so I found its simplicity fascinating, and I looked at the running time and it was like barely an hour, and it was like 91 minutes. I'm like, I can watch that. So I did, and I liked it. 3 stars. 3 stars to that, 2.5 stars to Jackpot, 2.5 stars to the Union, 3.5 stars to Furiosa, and 3 stars to Twister. And 3 stars to Sniper Ultimate Kill if I didn't talk about that. I'm an easy man. Yes, Furiosa is the best movie of that, easily. It's well constructed. Kind of boring though. But definitely worth watching. It's available on Crave. The Union is available on Netflix. Jackpot is available on Amazon Prime. M is available on YouTube. Twister is also available on Crave. So it ends with me. That is the show for this week. If you're interested in, box office or have any question about movies or something, let me know, and I will answer your questions. Thank you for tuning in. I'm trying to get back on track more. That is it for this week's episode, season 4, episode 7, number 41. Next episode will be the Magic 42. For, the relaunched version of this podcast. If I can find out when the heck I even started. I think that was way back almost a year ago, reviewing Killers of the Flower Moon. It might have been. Um, was like when the modern version of this podcast was born. Um, because I also did, weekend box office and stuff like that. And then I also counted the Poets Cast. So Killers of the Flower Moon was the first one, and that was in October. So we're kind of coming up on an anniversary. We got a month in. I still don't know what I'm gonna do for TIFF. I'll be discussing that with my brother when he comes on Thursday. And thank you so much for listening. And be safe, and I'll see you at the movies. Well, you know what? One more thing that I'll say, because I didn't really get into the Instigators. I only just finished it, and this was a movie, another streaming movie by Apple TV Plus. And interestingly, what interested me in this movie was a TikTok that I saw, a funny clip of the movie that turned out not to be in the movie at all. And it's just basically Matt Damon, Casey Affleck robbing, of course, a Dunkin' Donuts, which is based in Boston. So it's just kind of like, hey, that worked for Ben Affleck. Why not for Casey Affleck and Matt Damon? And nowhere to be seen in the movie. It's from the director of the Roadhouse remake, which I've mentioned before. And it's another one of his, like, at home movies, I'd call them, where it's basically like, I don't want to say lazy filmmaking, but similar to American Made and the movie he made during lockdown called Locked Down. It's kind of like way too improvisational, not really professionally mounted. It is co-written by Casey Affleck, and that's probably how it was made. It's like Matt Damon doing his, brother a solid. He's been with Casey Affleck on Good Will Hunting. They were in Oppenheimer together. They did Jerry. Um, they were also both in Interstellar, although they don't share any scenes together. And this was just kind of him, uh, doing a solid, because ever since Casey Affleck got Me Too'd during his Oscar winning run in Manchester by the Sea, during that time, and that was, right at the time that Me Too was happening, where, if you don't know, it was very unprofessional to the ladies on set. And then doing a movie with Joaquin Phoenix, who I haven't gotten into his unprofessionalism, but basically, uh, they are doing a movie together called I'm Not There. No, I'm Not Here. Um, I haven't seen it, but it's just that was the one where Joaquin Phoenix grew the beard and appeared on Letterman and was really weird. I'm Still Here is what it was called. Anyways, so Casey Affleck directed that movie, and basically it was all improvisational, and there wasn't a whole lot set up. And one of the women who worked on the movie um, stayed at Casey Affleck's house or like a friend's house and stuff like that. And the main thing that I remembered, and it's in this Mashable article put out in exquisite detail. And I remember this because I read it and I was just like, there were Me Too articles coming about every actor each week. And I was just like, okay, another one, really? And the way that it was written was so good that I'm like, oh, yes, really. And they describe the point of view of the woman who, like, basically was in a situation where Casey Affleck was her boss. He directed the movie, and they were staying overnight together at somebody's house. I'm not sure if it was Casey's. It was Casey's, let's say. And she was like, okay, well, I need to sleep on the couch. And he did the whole, like, no, 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 sleep in the bed. That's an order. Basically, I can't let you, I'm doing you a favor. And she's like, I really don't care. And he's like, no, sleep in the bed, okay? And then he uh, while she was sleeping, got up and slept, got into the bed with her as when he thought she was asleep, and kind of tried to make a move. And it was just so skeezy, and it was like rendered in a way, and I really do think it's because of the wording of the article, and they also mentioned his other inappropriate behavior, but it was enough that studios wouldn't touch Casey Affleck even after he'd won Best Actor. What has Casey Affleck done since? Nothing. He did a movie that was on Netflix that was straight to VOD called Every Breath You Take, and which I haven't seen. And then he did Our Friend with, Dakota Johnson having cancer, and Jason Segel is in that. It's a decent movie, but the plot isn't like strong enough. But you're like, oh yeah, all all pretty good. Still didn't go to theaters, despite being decent. Lord knows many worse movies have made it. And then he shows up in Oppenheimer, and when he showed up in Oppenheimer in the theater, people were like, "Oh no!" Like it was really that bad and stuff. So he hasn't been in a movie since. And this is him being like, okay, well, how do I still be relevant? Because theaters aren't going to touch me. And it was like, oh, well, we'll do another streaming movie, but it will be for Apple. Matt Damon doing his buddy a solid, being a part of it, so it like gets some flash. You have a director who had a recent hit, and it's on Apple TV Plus, so it's like there you go. You live to fight another day, Affleck. Um, and yeah, the movie has Ving Rhames, it has Ron Perlman, it has Hong Chow, who was recently Oscar nominated. All of those actors, get work, and then it also has Toby Jones, it has Michael Stuhlbarg in a small role, it has Alfred Molina in like a small role. I don't even know what they're talking about. I don't even know if they know what they're talking about. There's jokes about them fleeing to Canada, you know. And it's just basically the whole plot is Matt Damon and Casey Affleck decide to rob a joint, and then there isn't much there, and then they run into the mayor, and then they rob the mayor, and then there's a bracelet, and then they call another guy, and they want the combination of the safe, and everybody wants the combination of the safe, but they can't get it, and then the therapist shows up, and then the therapist is with them for a while and then not with them, and then they decide to go back, and then it's sort of like another heist happens, and the cops are following them most of the time, but then not following because it's like Boston, you know. Um, and then it kind of ends up in the same place where it began, but it's been kind of confusing the whole time. You don't know what happens, so it's what I didn't even get to rate it on a letterbox, but I guess I'd have to give it a 1.5. I'd give it 1.5 stars because it's has a lot of good actors in it who know that they can bullshit their way through bad material. It just so happens the bad material is co-written by Casey Affleck and Doug Liman reuniting with Matt Damon for the first time since The Bourne Identity. You would think it'd be more celebratory, but it's made like, American made, where it's kind of ugly, um, wide angle lenses, documentary style, very improvisational. And it's just that's not the foundation of a good story. There's a hope that, like, oh, we can make this into something along the way. But if it doesn't have a good foundation, then it's not good. If this movie were just like, and it wouldn't sell at Apple, and it wouldn't sell to theaters, so I get it. But if it were just like a slice of life drama, like a sequel to Good Will Hunting, which every day it comes by, it seems like it's getting, closer and closer to that actually happen. If it was just a slice of life drama with like Matt Damon living his life as like a regular guy, Casey Affleck living his life as a regular guy, but he's like also an alcoholic, which his character is in the movie, and like them getting by, and then, these actors all involved, and they didn't add the whole heist element, which has just gotten to be such a hack sell at this point. Like, what movie? I feel like I talk about it every week of like, oh, it's this, but it's a heist, but they steal in a really half-assed way, you know. It's like that. Like, if it was more slice of life dramas, please, because I like action movies, but don't make me overdose.